The rain fell steadily that September evening, turning the sidewalks into mirrors that reflected the glow of streetlights. Margaret Hayes sat on a weathered bench near the corner of Maple and 3rd. Her daughter Emma nestled close beside her. The little girl clutched a worn teddy bear, its fur matted from years of love and comfort. Margaret was 42, though the past year had aged her in ways that numbers couldn't capture. Her blonde hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail, was damp from the rain. She wore a beige dress that had once been nice enough for church, now wrinkled and stained at the hem. Her eyes, red from crying, stared at nothing in particular. Emma was only 5 years old, with golden hair braided down her back and bangs that framed her small, serious face. She wore a pink dress with tiny flowers on it, the nicest thing she owned. Unlike her mother, Emma's eyes were alert, watching the people who hurried past them with umbrellas and briefcases, too busy to notice a woman and child sitting in the rain. "Mommy," Emma whispered, tugging gently on her mother's sleeve. "Don't cry anymore." Margaret wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm trying to figure out what we're going to do." They had been evicted that morning, 3 months behind on rent, with nowhere to turn and no family left to call. Margaret's meager savings had vanished into medical bills after Emma's bout with pneumonia last winter. Her job at the diner had barely covered their expenses even in the best of times. And when the diner closed last month, those times ended. "Maybe someone will help us," Emma said quietly, her small voice carrying a child's simple faith. A black luxury sedan pulled up to the curb nearby. The engine purred softly before falling silent. Margaret barely noticed. She was lost in her thoughts, mentally calculating how many nights they could afford at the cheapest motel she'd seen on the edge of town. The car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was perhaps 35, dressed in an expensive charcoal suit that somehow remained crisp despite the rain. His dark hair was styled neatly, and even from a distance, everything about him spoke of success and comfort. He'd been on his way to a charity fundraiser at the Grand Hotel, the kind of event where people wrote checks and felt good about themselves. Thomas Crawford had built his wealth in real estate development. He owned half the commercial buildings downtown and lived in a penthouse that overlooked the city. His calendar was full of meetings, deals, and social obligations. He was a man who had everything, except perhaps the time to notice the world around him. He was about to walk toward the hotel entrance when something made him pause. Perhaps it was the image itself, so out of place in this part of town. A woman and child, sitting in the rain, looking utterly lost. Most people would have looked away. Thomas almost did. Then Emma turned her head and looked directly at him. Their eyes met across the rainy street, and something in that child's gaze stopped him completely. There was no plea in it, no demand, just a quiet, steady look that seemed to say, "I see you. I believe you're good." Emma tugged her mother's sleeve again. "Mommy, look. Maybe that man will help us." Margaret followed her daughter's gaze and immediately looked down, embarrassed. "Emma, we can't bother people. That man he's probably very busy." But Thomas was already walking toward them. He didn't know why. His rational mind told him to keep walking, that he was late, that this wasn't his problem. But his feet carried him across the street anyway. He stood before them, water dripping from his coat. Up close, he could see the exhaustion in Margaret's face, the dirt on Emma's small shoes, the way they both shivered slightly in the cool evening air. "Excuse me," he said, his voice gentler than he'd expected. "Are you all right?" Margaret's cheeks flushed. "We're fine. Thank you. We're just waiting for someone." It was a lie, and they both knew it. Thomas crouched down slightly, putting himself at eye level with Emma. The little girl looked at him seriously, still clutching her teddy bear. "That's a nice bear," Thomas said. "His name is Coco," Emma replied. "He keeps me brave when things are scary." Something in Thomas's chest tightened. He looked back at Margaret. "I don't mean to pry, but you both look cold and wet. There's a warm cafe just around the corner. Would you let me buy you some dinner? No strings attached, just, you look like you could use a hot meal." Margaret's pride warred with her desperation. She'd been hungry before. She could handle that. But Emma hadn't eaten since their meager breakfast that morning. We couldn't impose, Margaret said quietly. You're not imposing. I'm offering. Thomas smiled slightly. To be honest, I was headed to a fancy dinner where people will talk about helping others while eating $70 steaks. I think I'd rather actually help someone instead. Emma looked up at her mother with hopeful eyes. Margaret felt tears threatening again, but this time they were different. She nodded. The cafe was warm and bright, with red vinyl booths and the smell of fresh coffee and homemade pie. Thomas guided them to a corner booth and ordered hot chocolate for Emma, coffee for Margaret, and a full meal for all of them. As Emma ate her grilled cheese sandwich with the serious concentration only a hungry child possesses, Margaret slowly told their story. The job loss, the eviction, the impossible choices that had led them to that bench in the rain. She spoke quietly with dignity, never asking for anything. Thomas listened. Really listened. He thought about his own childhood, about the grandmother who'd raised him after his parents died, about the times they'd struggled, about the teacher who'd believed in him and helped him get a scholarship to college. He'd forgotten those days, buried them under years of success and comfort. I have a building downtown, Thomas said when Margaret finished. The upper floor has apartments. One of them is vacant. It's fully furnished. You and Emma could stay there. Margaret shook her head immediately. I can't accept charity. I need to work to earn, then work, Thomas interrupted gently. I need a property manager for that building. Someone to coordinate maintenance, screen tenants, handle complaints. It's real work and it pays a real salary. The apartment comes with the job. If you want it, Margaret stared at him, searching his face for the catch, the angle, the thing he wanted in return. She found only sincerity. Why? She whispered. Why would you do this for strangers? Thomas looked at Emma, who had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, chocolate mustache still on her upper lip, teddy bear tucked under her chin. He thought about all the people who'd helped him along the way, about the kindness that had been extended when he needed it most. Because someone helped me once, he said simply, and because your daughter looked at me like she believed I was the kind of person who would help. I'd like to be that person. Margaret's tears fell freely now, but they were good tears, healing tears. Thank you, she managed to say. Thank you. 3 months later, Margaret stood in the apartment's kitchen preparing dinner. She'd proven to be an excellent property manager, organized and compassionate with tenants, firm but fair with contractors. She'd even enrolled in a night course in business management. Emma was in her own bedroom playing with new toys but still keeping Coco the bear close by. She was enrolled in kindergarten now, already making friends, already laughing more than she had in months. Thomas stopped by occasionally to check on the building. He always made time to say hello to Emma, to ask about her day. He'd become something like a family friend, though Margaret was careful not to presume anything. One evening, as Thomas was leaving after a brief visit, Emma ran to him and hugged his legs tightly. Thank you for helping us that day, she said, looking up at him. I knew you would. You had kind eyes. Thomas knelt down and returned the hug. Thank you for believing in me, he said. Sometimes we all need someone to believe we're capable of goodness. As he walked to his car, Thomas reflected on how much had changed. The fundraiser he'd missed that rainy evening, it hadn't mattered at all. But stopping for a woman and child on a bench, that had mattered more than any check he could have written. He'd learned something Emma already knew, that true kindness isn't about grand gestures or public recognition. It's about seeing someone who needs help and simply choosing to care. It's about being the person someone believes you are, even when it would be easier to walk away. The rain had stopped weeks ago, but the memory of that evening remained crystal clear. The memory of a little girl who pointed to a stranger and said, "Maybe that man will help us." And the moment when that stranger decided to be exactly who she believed him to be. Sometimes, Thomas thought, the people we help end up helping us even more. They remind us who we are, who we can be, and what truly matters in this brief, precious life. And that, he'd learned, was worth more than all his wealth combined.